doing alright? So this is the last video of my reading through The Wasteland. If you haven't seen the other three, I'll have them linked below. And yeah, today I'm going to be reading the very last part. I'm going to be reading What the Thunder Said. Yeah, this has been really fun. I've been really loving just going deep into T.S. Eliot and into this really great poem. I hope you found at least some of it interesting. Again, this is just my reading of this poem. It's not any sort of expert's guide to the poem. It's just me talking off the top of my head as I'm reading through the poem. I hope you've enjoyed at least some of that. It's been fun for me to make this, and it's been been great to spend some time in this really great and weird and sad but beautiful poem. So in the last one, I was kind of splitting up the poem as I went through it and just talking about different points as they came up. I'm not totally sure how that worked. I think I might do it the old way, and I'll just read the whole section and then I'll give a few thoughts at the end. So, without further ado, here's the last part of The Wasteland. What the Thunder Said. After the torchlight red on sweaty faces, after the frosty silence in the gardens, after the agony in stony places, the shouting and the crying, prison and palace and reverberation of thunder of spring over distant mountains. He who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying with a little patience. Here is no water but only rock, rock and no water, and the sandy road, the road winding above among the mountains, which are mountains of rock without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink. Amongst the rock, one cannot stop or think. Sweat is dry and feet are in the sand. If there were only water among the rock, dead mountain mouth of carious teeth that cannot split. Here one can neither stand, nor lie, nor sit. There is not even silence in the mountains, but dry, sterile thunder without rain. There is not even solitude in the mountains, but red sullen faces sneer and snarl from doors of mud-cracked houses. If there were water and no rock, if there were rock and also water, and water, a spring, a pool among the rock, if there were the sound of water only, not the cicada and the dry grass singing, but the sound of water over a rock, where the hermit thrush sings in the pine trees, drip, drop, drip, drop, 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 drop. But there is no water. Who is the third who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding, wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman. But who is that on the other side of you? What is that sound high in the air, murmur of maternal lamentation? Who are those hooded hordes swarming over endless plains, stumbling in cracked earth, ringed by the flat horizon only? What is the city over the mountains, cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air? Falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London, unreal. A woman drew her long black hair out tight and fiddled whisper music on those strings, and bats with baby faces in the violet light whistled and beat their wings, and crawled head downward down the blackened wall, and upside down in air were towers, tolling reminiscent bells that kept the hours, and voices singing out of empty cisterns and exhausted wells. In this decayed hole among the mountains, in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing over the tumbled graves. About the chapel, there is the empty chapel, only the winds hum. It has no windows, and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one. Only a cock stood out on the roof tree, cocorico, cocorico, in a flash of lightning. Then a damp gust, bringing rain. Ganja was sunken, and the limp leaves waited for rain, while the black clouds gathered far distant over Himavant. The jungle crouched, humped in silence. Then spoke the thunder. Data, what have we given? My friend, blood shaking my heart, the awful daring of a moment's surrender, which an age of prudence can never retract. By this, and only this, we have existed, which is not to be found in our obituaries, or in memories draped by the beneficent spider, or under seals broken by the lean solicitor in our empty rooms. Datam. I have heard the key turn in the door once, and turn once only. We think of the key, each in his prison. Thinking of the key, each confirms a prison. Only at nightfall, ethereal rumours revive for a moment a broken Coriolanus. Damyata. The boat responded gaily to the hand expert with sail and oar. The sea was calm. Your heart would have responded gaily when invited, beating obedient to controlling hands. I sat upon the shore fishing, with the arid plain behind me. Shall I at least set my lands in order? London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Pescore nel fuoco cegli fina, quando fiam uti celidon. O swallow, swallow, the prance d'octane à la tour abolie. These fragments I have shored against my ruins. Why then ill fit you? Hieronymo's mad again. Data divatam damyata. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Okay, so Eliot gives us like three references really to at least make a little bit of sense from this last section. So he gives us the journey to Emmaus, so from the Gospels, can't remember which one, when Jesus, after his resurrection, finds two disciples, two followers on the way to Emmaus, and he goes with them, and they don't know who he is. We also have the approach to the chapel perilous, and he tells us to see Miss Weston's book. So this, I think, again, is part of the Grail myth. And then he says, and the present decay of Eastern Europe. And so he is bringing in his own present day, his own views of society and politics and things like that into it. And I think really, so what we have here is again, like our first part, he's really underlining just how desperate and desolate this landscape is, how dry and quenched it is. We have constantly the dry rock. We have this really wonderful section of just pleading for water, if there were water and no rock, and it just goes on repeating and repeating and repeating. I really love that. I think it's just so desperate, and I think that really hits home really wonderfully. And then it gets, I think the way it evokes the road to Emmaus there is really quite creepy. I can't say why, but yeah, if I was reading this late at night by myself, I'd be checking all the corners of the rooms before leaving the room if I just read that. And then again, we go back to this landscape where we have these characters who are almost like refugees, almost in this landscape, and they're just desperate for some kind of water, and they're singing. And we don't really know what they're singing. This kind of whisper music, maybe because their throats and their mouths are so dry that they can't manage to sing anything louder. But at the same time, we have these flashes of thunder over the mountains. So initially the thunder is dry and sterile, so even the thunder isn't really giving us any relief. There's no, we have the sound of the storm and the clouds above in the sky, but no rain initially. But then eventually, after we have more of this situation and this longing and this desperation and this whispered singing, we are told of then a damp gust bringing rain. And with this section, Ganja was sunken and the limp leaves waited for rain, while the black clouds gathered far distant over Himavant. And so even though there is this storm bringing rain, I think particularly with the limp leaves waiting for the rain, it's almost as if I think the weather is taunting this landscape, and that I think the rain is, at least the way I read it, the rain is still distant, so they can hear the sound of the thunder, they can see the black clouds far off, and it might be raining down there, but it's not raining here. At least that's the way I read it. Okay, and then the thunder tells us three things. It says data dyad vam damyata, which mean give, sympathize, and control. And apparently this is a reference to the give me a moment, the Brihad Ariyaka Upanishad, and yeah, Eliot just says, yeah, you can find out the meaning of this fable here. But yeah, essentially each of these words means give, sympathize, and control. And at least to me when I'm reading this, it feels like these three words almost like a slap in the face, almost like salt in the wound for this situation. And where they need this replenishment and new life from the water, all they're given are these three words for them to maybe reflect on themselves instead. And then with the end of the poem, it really just shows us that nothing has changed. We have, I sat on the shore fishing with the arid plain behind me. So that the land of the Fisher King, the wasteland, is still a wasteland, it's still arid, it's still dry, it's still parched. And then we have these little fragments at the end. He says, these fragments I've shored against my ruins, and to me it just feels a bit unhinged, that things just fallen apart. It, at least to me, has an air of hopelessness. And it ends with these three words, or this one word repeated, shanti, 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 which is, let's have a look. So shanti is, that's the formal ending to an Upanishad. And he says that the closest equivalent that we have in English is the peace which passeth understanding, which again, like the end of the fire sermon, is kind of trying to link Eastern and Western sort of philosophy and religion. And so it's, yeah, I suppose almost an ironic ending that we have this real hopelessness, this feeling that nothing can change, that salvation is so close and yet so far away, and at the same time there's this feeling of peace which passes understanding. And I don't know whether that's to say that Eliot just thinks, well, this is our situation and we just have to learn to make the best of it. I don't know if that's what he means, or whether there's some kind of peace you can have by working through this. There are probably all kinds of different ways you could read that. And you could also probably dive quite deeply into those last few quotations there, even though they're only little fragments of other things. To me, they give the impression of being quite dense, and I'm sure you could get a richer idea of what's going on by going into that. I just didn't feel like doing that today. But yeah, so to me, the ending of the poem, it's a mix of tragedy and hope, that there is an answer, and it's maybe not the answer that we want, not the answer we were expecting, but it's still an answer, and maybe there's a way to make peace with this. So there we go, that's kind of my reading, at least at the moment, my reading of The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. If you have any ideas about what you think is going on here, please do feel free to let me know, and everyone else know in the comments. That'll be really cool. Yeah, I suppose that's the end. This has been really fun, so thank you for watching if you've made it all the way through this little series. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you soon for more poetry and non-poetry related stuff soon. Alright, bye.